And it is pretty embarrassing for Britain to have the special relationship that we have, and everybody knows we have it with the United States of America, but Donald Trump has seen fit not to invite Sir Keir Starmer, no doubt because of his views on Donald Trump, no doubt because of David Lammy's sayings on Donald Trump, maybe indeed because of Sadiq Khan's protestations about what a horrible man Donald Trump is. You know, you can't mess around in politics and pretend that you're in a student union, because otherwise you end up being left on the outside of all of the good stuff that's going on. And next Monday, when Donald Trump is inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States of America, I consider it to be a massive stain on British history that our Prime Minister will not be there. Let's ask Tobias Ellwood what he makes of it. Tobias, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
It's pretty awful, is it not, that, you know, here we are, supposedly the friend of the United States, the special relationship that exists between the two countries, the long history of support for one another in times of war and in times of peace, and we don't have a seat at the table.
Yes, I don't understand the details of this, so we'll wait for government perhaps to clarify. But you're absolutely right that the United States is our closest security ally. And as we've discussed on your program many times, the world is getting far more dangerous, far more unstable, and we need to be close with America to deal with the challenges that are coming over the hill. I've just been commenting this week that 2025 will be the year of grey zone warfare. We're going to be attacked left, right, and centre, and Western nations, particularly Britain and America, need to work together to unify and stand up to that threat. And what we're seeing in Ukraine, for example, is where Putin is surviving. He will continue to place a threat on the UK, the West, Europe, and indeed America as well. So it does seem a little bit confusing, puzzling as to why the Prime Minister, whatever you think of the Prime Minister, is not invited to be part of the inauguration process.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, but I mean, does it not also suggest that there's something that the Prime Minister might have done to mean that he would be excluded from it?
If there is anything that they've done, then that should be overlooked in some respect, because, as I say, to invite the leader, the closest security ally of America, which is the United Kingdom, they very much see us in that way. We offer a sense of purpose when it comes to global security. We help craft the international rules-based order as it sits today. So it would almost seem churlish if that's the case. There may be some detail that we're missing here, so I'm not sure we should jump to conclusions yet. It could be that a member of the royal family will be attending instead, which is actually the head of state, if you think about it. But it does seem odd. Certainly, I mean, I myself will be going to America for the inauguration period, not just to be witness the celebrations and the changeover, which will certainly be interesting, but also develop those strengths, to create those back channels, to have an understanding of where this Republican Party under Donald Trump, who, let's be honest, is far more controversial, will take America in a very, very different direction. But America has spoken. Donald Trump has been elected, and it's important that we work, as I stressed, with our closest security ally.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it looks as though already the fact that Donald Trump is merely coming into office is having some effect on things going on in the Middle East. It looks very much as though there will be some kind of peace deal which will be possibly taking place over the course of the next few days. And we've just been speaking to Elon Levy from the Israeli side. He's a former government spokesman. He's saying we have to be a bit careful, but certainly Hamas are on the back foot, and Trump has warned basically if they have not been released, if the hostages have not been released by the time he gets into power, which is next Monday, there's going to be all sorts of hell to pay.
It could very well be that's the case. I don't know whether you recall, but when Jimmy Carter left office and Ronald Reagan came in, there were American hostages that the Iranians were keeping, and they were released only after Carter had departed. The talks that are taking place today, I'm pleased to learn that the Trump administration has representation there as well in Doha. So when we hear that the outgoing president suggests we're on the brink of a deal, that really is good news indeed. But we have been here before, remember, so close to securing an agreement, and then the talks then collapse. But perhaps it is this unpredictability of Trump, as you say, in saying they'll all hell will be paid unless something actually happens. That's focused the minds of Hamas. But you've just been reporting yourself that what the Houthis are doing in Yemen is trying to scupper the talks with fresh attacks that are taking place from Yemen. We will know in the next few hours where things stand.
Yeah, absolutely right. Let's talk about matters a bit closer to home. Keir Starmer's government goes from bad to worse every single day. We've got Rachel Reeves having come back from China with a very poor deal, it would seem. £600 million, 120 million a year over 5 years, 60 times less than they gave to Indonesia, 30 times less money than they gave to Peru. Also warnings yesterday that national security could be at risk if Britain invites China into the sort of energy market in Britain and helps them to set up, you know, wind farms, helps them to set up solar panel farms, helps them to be part of our, if you like, our electricity grid. What do you make of the government's sort of cozying up to China?
Well, firstly, China isn't going away. This is going to be China's century. In our lifetimes, they will challenge the United States militarily, economically, and indeed technologically in dominance. And therefore, there needs to be some way of working with China. I think our trade with China is worth up to 10% of our GDP. That is huge. But you're right to point out the fact that China steals intellectual property. It coerces. It uses approaches which are not appropriate in the UK, or indeed, following international standards. Yeah. And especially when it comes to security matters. And given the fact that there is this geopolitical tensions growing between East and West, particularly between China and America, then we could easily find ourselves vulnerable in the very areas that you're talking about, critical national infrastructure, where they could so easily, through a backdoor electronic system, switch our processes off. I mean, our power wouldn't work if, for example, the wind farms were interfered with. So we're lacking a coherent strategy when it comes to China. How do we work with China in areas where it's safe to work with? And there are bigger issues such as climate change and so on that we need to work on. But at the moment, China is given a free rein. They are openly reinterpreting the international rules-based order, collecting countries through its One Belt, One Road programs to actually challenge the West in the way we do business, particularly at the United Nations and through the World Trade Organization. And I'm sorry that we didn't go there to China with a collective effort with our allies to try and challenge what China is doing. Instead, what's happening, and the United States is particularly, I'm afraid, at fault of this, is everybody's saying, we accept that China does this, we're just going to become more isolated, we're just going to look after ourselves. And that means globalization essentially is dead, and that'll affect all economies across the world.
But China doesn't care what anybody thinks. I mean, that's the bottom line, isn't it? I mean, we had to fight them off when Huawei were almost going to be given the kind of carte blanche to enter Britain as the official kind of government, telephone business, which would have been a terribly bad idea. And it had to be the government of Britain, who, under the Tories at the time, said, no, thank you very much, we're not actually going to do it. But do you worry that this government that we currently have seems to be flailing around looking for investment and money from almost anywhere? It's almost like they don't care where it comes from.
Well, let me just answer that in two parts, because you mentioned Huawei, and I was one of the MPs. There are many others. This was Parliament, not government at the time, that actually raised our concerns to say we cannot have China embedded in our systems here. And they are not now, and that is actually good. Yeah. But across the world, there's over 100 countries, I think, that do have Huawei embedded into their systems. And those countries are now almost subservient, if you like, into following the path that China is leading. And over time, they will have to shift from using the dollar as their second currency to the RMB, and they will probably have to shift away from GPS in the longer term to use the Beidou system. So you can see how our world is splintering to two spheres of competing influence, and that's very, very dangerous indeed. It does mean it's more testing for our economy, and you always, when you hear this phrase, I have confidence in my minister, you normally know there's not long before the change is afoot. Right. But we're seeing the pound at its lowest level, I think, for about a year or so. You've got a choice. You either raise taxes, or you cut spending, or you vastly improve growth, make the cake bigger, if you like, by improving business confidence. And we've not seen much of that. The AI is actually, for us, I think, very, very important. It was Jeremy Hunt that recognized this about a couple of years ago as Chancellor to say, what is Britain good at? Look around us now. What are we now good at in today's day and age? Very, very competitive indeed. What we do well is creative industries, life sciences, fintech, financial services, pharmaceuticals. We are the third high-tech superpower in the world after America and China. That is what we need to excel at. That's what's going to allow our country to grow in this very, very competitive environment. And we need to stress that even further. But that requires all energies to then push this forward. Otherwise, you're going to end up in the situation now where we see our economy starting to actually stumble.
Yeah, indeed. Well, the pound at a 14-month low last night. We'll see how it opens this morning. Let's have a look at what Keir Starmer said yesterday about AI.
Look, I think it is important to recognise that we've got the freedom now in relation to regulation to do it in the way that we think is best for the UK, and that's what we intend to do. You're right to say there are different models around the world. There's a sort of EU approach, a US approach, but we have the ability to choose the one that we think is in our best interest, and we intend to do so.
He doesn't quite say the B word, does he? But he wants to, or he maybe doesn't want to. But he's basically saying outside of the EU, we're in a better position.
Yeah, that's right. But then you prompt me to want to say the B word because you might differ on this. I have always accepted the result of the referendum, but I've always felt, and I speak to defence businesses particularly, who are continue to be very angry that the deal that we end up with is not the best Brexit deal that we could have. And not many people know this, but it was a contract. It was a 5-year deal that we had in 2020, and it comes up for renewal in the spring, in a few months' time. Do we go back to Brussels and sign again exactly the Brexit deal that we have today? I actually don't know anybody. Maybe you're going to be the first that will actually say, no, there's nothing to change here. We'll just sign on.
No, I don't think that. No, I agree. Actually, you might be surprised to know, Tobias. Actually, agree with you. No, I think the Brexit deal that we did was absolutely hopeless. You know, the fact that it took that long to organise it from 2019 to 2020, and it was it was half baked. It was half done. It wasn't finished. Northern Ireland was left hanging out outside the organisation altogether. No, I would much rather see a better deal done. No question at all.
Well, it's good to hear that, because I remember the votes themselves, and there were some individuals that knew exactly what was being debated on. I'm afraid many of my colleagues, sad though it is, weren't quite sure the difference between the customs union and the common market and so forth, of the differences, the impact and so forth on businesses. During the referendum itself, you know, you had people like Nigel Farage, you had people like David Frost actually saying, of course we're going to stay in the single market, because that would be dangerous to our economy. We've got our political distance, and that's what many people in Britain were concerned about. That's what I think you're concerned about, political distance from Brussels. Economically, though, you know, half of our trade is done with the continent, and therefore that's going to continue. And if we've got America putting up barriers as well, throwing tariffs and so forth, and we've got this deal coming up for renewal in this spring and summer, then we'd be daft economically not to say there is a better deal to have. So we don't have the regulations and all the challenges that British businesses have, particularly the international ones, defence especially, that bump into this every day, that makes doing business in Britain more costly than doing it on the continent.
Well, I think we'd probably differ on how the deal should be restructured, but we think there should be a new deal. So we'll have to talk about that another time. Good to talk to you, Tobias. Thank you very much indeed.